Chapter 235 of Jujutsu Kaisen has dropped, and it gave us some crazy new information and a great ending to the fight. So we're going to break it all down here. But before we begin, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like for the video if you enjoyed it, so I can keep bringing you more anime content. Alright, let's get into that. Chapter 235 really sees the conclusion of this whole showdown between Sukuna and Gojo. I mean, we're not fully off of it yet because we know there's going to be at least one more chapter of wrap up, which I'm still saying is going to have some kind of twist, but we'll talk about more on that note later. So, when it comes to 235, really what we got is A, how Gojo managed to beat Maharaga, and then C, how he actually managed to beat Sukuna? I'm going to call it beating Sukuna. A lot of people are probably going to dispute that, but I'm going to call it beating Sukuna. So we begin this battle right off where last week's chapter ended, with him having just destroyed Agito, and basically he's in now almost the perfect position to destroy Maharaga. We find out that he's essentially using a long form aria where he uses the different chanted words to power up his technique, and he's trying to summon Red to take down Maharaga. Now, it's interesting because there's some other stuff here, like the confirmation that Maharaga seems to have a good sense of Gojo's abilities now, but it's still having a hard time reading what his curse energy is, which is interesting given that its whole premise is adapting and it's been allegedly adapting to Gojo this whole time. Another is the fact that it is now officially confirmed that Sukuna is using Piercing Blood. I'm not sure how. He doesn't have that technique. They say it comes from Max Elephant. I just assumed last week it was basically like a copied version, like he was just shooting out Max Elephant's water in a really condensed high velocity fashion to simulate Piercing Blood. But this week they like literally call it Piercing Blood. So I don't know like if he absorbed that from somebody or if that was in the black. He didn't say box open, so that was weird. But in this, we see Gojo finally managed to lure Sukuna out, and he delivered what might have been one of his coolest endings to a fight ever, and given his reputation, that is saying something. So within the context of this final conclusion, we find out that basically Gojo is going to summon Purple. This was the plan that we learned about last week. We weren't sure if it was going to happen, but essentially, we find out here something drastically interesting. Every time Gojo has used Purple up till now, he created it in front of himself by merging red and blue. This week we found out he does not need to do that at the creation of Purple. He can essentially have blue and red running separately and then bring them together to form Purple, which honestly is really, really fascinating. As far as Jujutsu goes, we always know there is like a balance between mixing elements together, and the idea that a sorcerer could just take two already conjured constructs, basically, whatever their aspects of their power or whatever, and transition them into something else makes a lot of sense, but it's not something we've ever seen a lot of. Now, this is Gojo, so if you were going to see it from anyone, it makes perfect sense it would be him, but that's what we see. He manages to trick Maharaga into thinking that he was going to use red and then blue on it. Of course, because it had adapted to blue, it didn't work as it had anticipated, and thus he was able to bring the two elements together and form arguably his most devastating attack. Now, with this conclusion, we finally see that while Gojo is somewhat battered and bruised from the explosion, Sukuna looks awful. He has been pushed to a horrible breaking point. Now, does this mean that he will finally be forced to have to surrender to Megami, as some of us have been speculating Gojo was attempting to do? Maybe. That seems likely. I mean, he has one finger left that's unaccounted for, but so much of himself is invested in this vessel now, it's very hard to picture that he'd actually want to risk everything on just a solitary finger. So it would make sense that he may attempt to make some kind of deal with Megami in order to relinquish command. On the flip side, we also have to consider that Sukuna could still attempt to do a last-ditch effort by opening his inventory box. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the future because I have a theory of what Sukuna's technique is, but even with the theory that I have, I don't think his inventory can hold very much. The reason for this is that no matter what causes him to acquire other people's powers, It was clearly stated that without some kind of medium to take the stress off, you can only hold up to 3 or 4 of them without your brain exploding. Now, it's not to say that he doesn't have a medium. Depending on what his actual technique is, his medium could be something like Malevolent Shrine itself. Of course, without having that out, I don't know how that would work. So therein lies the question of, are we actually going to get the trade-off and get Megami back next week, or are we going to actually get a extra little battle segment? With the 2-week break coming up, obviously we're going to have to wait to find out, but either could happen. But there is a strangely more likely possibility we're going to get here, so let's go ahead and talk about that. Now, I mentioned last week that I held the theory that Kenjaku was going to interfere in some way with this battle. Whether that be that he was going to attack Gojo or he was going to attack Sukuna, he would almost definitely attack and leave us on a cliffhanger. I was quite happy that didn't happen, but now I am forced to consider that it is still a possibility. And the reason for that is that he wants to end the Culling Games. He needs to kill Sukuna to end the Culling Games, and we know he is not going to miss the opportunity to A, finally bring a conclusion to this, and then C, actually wipe out Gojo. Yes, I know that labeling system doesn't make any sense, just roll with it. So, the idea here being that Kenjaku knows he's basically in the best position he's ever been in to take out these 2 characters, would have to act. Now, he has acted irregularly before and done things we just didn't anticipate, and that doesn't mean he won't do that this time. But still, ending the Culling Games and getting rid of Satoru Gojo permanently are within the grasp of anyone who's around there right now. And I think we also have to take into consideration the fact that even if Sukuna switches back with Megami, he still counts as Sukuna. We know this from Yuji at the beginning of the Culling Games, that even though Sukuna wasn't swapped with him, the Kogane still appeared and talked to Yuji. So they don't have to be in direct control of the vessel for them to still count as the participant. I think that that's going to be a vital part going forward, because for this whole thing to wrap up, Sukuna or Kenjaku has to die. Now, to be fair, that does also leave us the possibility that Sukuna, Megami, or Gojo could wipe out Kenjaku, thus ending the Culling Games and causing it all to go into effect. I just don't think he's the kind of guy that's willing to sacrifice himself for his vision, because his whole thing is he wants to see what will happen at the end. So only time will tell on this front, but I think we're in for something next week. Well, week after, as soon as the next chapter comes out. But why don't you guys let me know what you thought? Did you enjoy this whole showdown, or do you think it maybe went a little long and we could have gotten some more dynamics from it? Go ahead and let me know in the comments, and I will catch you next time.